All right, we are back with King of the Mound, my summer with Satchel, Paige, and we are on chapter 17, top of the ninth, and we only have a few more chapters left. I think just two. Okay, so the morning of the semifinal game, Nick awakened at his usual time and went downstairs to the little restaurant at the hotel to get bread and coffee for Mr. Churchill and his father. He left half the food in his room and then went down the hall and knocked on Mr. Churchill's door. After 20 seconds without a response, he knocked again and then pressed his ear against the wood. A moment later, he heard what sounded like a faint groan. "Mr. Churchill," he called, "it's time to get up." This time the groan was loud enough to carry clearly into the hall, and Nick tried the door and discovered that it was unlocked. He pushed it open a few inches and then spoke through the crack. "Are you okay, Mr. Churchill?" "No," Mr. Churchill said, the word trailing off into a long moan. "Get a doctor." Nick dashed downstairs, moving as quickly as he could on his bad leg. It was always stiff in the morning, and the desk clerk dialed the closest doctor. 10 minutes later, a tall man in a dark cloak entered the lobby carrying a black valise. Nick guided him upstairs and then stood in the corner while the doctor conducted his medical examination to a chorus of labored moans and grunts from Mr. Churchill. "Your stomach is agitated," the doctor said, finally. "I didn't need a doctor to tell me that," Mr. Churchill said. "I want to know what I can do about it." "Stay in bed," the doctor said, "and drink lots of water with baking soda." A moment later, he had packed his equipment back into the valise and was gone. Mr. Churchill rolled over in bed, his sheet drawn up over his body like a shroud, and stared at Nick. "I hate doctors," he said. $5 to give you a bunch of common sense." "I met some nice doctors," Nick said, "but they want you to do everything they say, even though they're sometimes wrong." Mr. Churchill gave him a pointed look. "Are they wrong about you?" Nick shrugged, embarrassed. "Maybe." Mr. Churchill slowly sat up and tried to swing his feet to the floor, but halfway through the motion he hunched over, groaning. "You're supposed to stay in bed," Nick said. "I've got to get to the park," Mr. Churchill said. "The team needs a manager." "If you stay in bed today, maybe you'll get better. You don't want to miss the final, do you?" Mr. Churchill half smiled and then flopped back against his pillow. "You sound like my mother." He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "Who's going to manage the team?" "My dad." "Your dad is a good man, but I don't know if he's ready to be a manager." "Sure he is," Nick said. "He was a catcher, and catchers always make good managers. Plus, he knows more about the teams in this tournament than anyone." "I guess he does," Mr. Churchill said. He rolled over on his side and looked at Nick, his face sallow in the faint light from the window. "Fine. Go tell your father that he's running the show today." Nick nodded and then let himself out of the room before letting the huge grin spread across his face. His father was shaving in the common bathroom at the end of the hall, and Nick walked up behind him and then paused in the door. "Mr. Churchill is sick," he said. His father glanced up and looked at Nick in the reflection of the scratched mirror, his eyes dark and unblinking. "He can't manage the team today, and he wants you to do it." His father drew the straight edge across the last bit of cream on his cheek and then carefully washed the blade before rinsing his face and patting it dry. When he was finally finished, he turned around to face Nick. "We're going to win," he said, "because if we don't, there's no future for us in Bismarck." The semifinal game was against the Omaha V8s. Before the first pitch, his father gathered the team and gave them a short scouting report on Omaha's pitchers. Nick could tell he was nervous by the way he gripped his notebook and the hint of a tremor in his voice. "It's simple," he said at the conclusion of his scouting report. "Be patient because some of these pitchers can't find the strike zone. And run the moment you get it on base because that catcher's got a noodle for an arm. And if we do that, we'll get some early runs and win this one for Mr. Churchill, okay?" The team nodded quickly in assent and then went out and did exactly what Nick's father had asked. 5 of the 9 batters walked. They ran at will on the opposing catcher, and by the time the dust settled, they had won 15-6 to advance to the finals. As soon as the game was over, Nick ran back to the hotel with the lineup card. Mr. Churchill was sitting up in his bed, a tall glass of cloudy water perched on his enormous stomach, when Nick burst into his room. "We won!" Nick said. "We're going to the finals!" Mr. Churchill punched the air and then looked at Nick, a huge grin on his face. "One more win," he said. One win, and people will remember this team forever." The championship was a rematch against the Duncan Cementers from Oklahoma. Nick was so nervous that he barely slept the night before the game. Maybe Satch had shut them down the first time they played, but it was hard to beat a good team twice. The good news was that the tournament had scheduled a few extra days between the semifinal and final, and Satch, therefore, would be pitching on a full 3 days of rest, which was more than he had gotten in months. The team obviously shared Nick's nerves because the players were quiet as they took pregame batting practice. Even Satch seemed affected. He hopped back and forth on the balls of his feet during the national anthem like a boxer trying to keep warm before a fight. The first few innings of the game were agonizing. Every cementer hit felt like a punch to Nick's gut, and they had plenty of hits. But Satch was also getting lots of strikeouts, and he managed to limit the damage. In the top of the seventh, it was tied 1-1, and Nick was reduced to huddling at the end of the bench, nervously chewing on his dirty fingernails. Joe Desperado led off with a double, and Red Harley worked a tough walk before Double Duty hit a soft chopper toward third. An easy out at first, but good enough to advance the runners to second and third. The whole team was standing on their feet and shouting as Moose strode to the plate, but he lunged at the first pitch and hit a soft flare to the shortstop for the second out of the inning. Satch, who had been gently swinging a bat in on the on-deck circle, glanced at Mr. Churchill. "It's good you pay me a lot of money because I've got to do everything myself," he said with a cocky grin. A moment later, he was standing at the plate, his shoulders slumped and his bat twirling a lazy circle over his back shoulder. He looked too sleepy and lanky to be dangerous, but Nick had learned that was just an act. Satch watched the first two pitches, a ball and a strike, his body language betraying no interest in swinging the bat. But as the pitcher went into his windup for the third pitch, Satch crouched, his gaze suddenly intent. "Come on, Satch!" Nick heard himself yelling. "Hit it!" Satch had already started his swing, his bat moving forward in a smooth stroke as his head stared down at the ball. A clean crack echoed around the ballpark as a white blur streaked past the glove of the leaping second baseman. Nick was on his knees, fist pounding the dirt as Joe and Red crossed the plate. It was 3-1. They were winning. 9 more outs, his father said tersely beside him. 9 outs to a championship. Quincy struck out to end the top of the seventh. Nick ran out to bring Satch's glove, but Mr. Churchill got to him first. He was so nervous that the words were pouring out of his mouth in a steady stream. "How's the arm?" he was asking Satch as Nick approached. "Are you still feeling strong? Should I get Chet up? We got lots of relief. Hilton can throw too, or maybe even double duty." Satch put up a calming hand on Mr. Churchill's shoulders. "There's no reason to be all crazy," he said. "Why don't you go put your feet up and relax, because old Satch has got it from here." And Satch was exactly right. He gave up 9 hits in the game, but struck out 14. And when the last cementer swung and missed at a final sharp curveball and the team exploded onto the field in celebration, he just smiled as if the outcome had never been in doubt. He kept that same smile through the awarding of the championship trophy and the special ceremony where the writers covering the tournament gave him the MVP, which was an obvious choice since he'd won 4 games, gotten a key save, and struck out 60 batters, a record that everyone agreed was likely to stand for a very long time. In fact, his smile didn't fade until the team was back in the little locker room and Quincy Troop came over to him and Double Duty and Hilton Smith and Chet Brewer. I was just talking to a scout, Quincy said. And you know what he told me? He said that he would recommend signing all of us to play pro ball for $100,000 each if we was white. What do you think about that? I don't want to think about it, Satch said. He glanced at the trophy, which Mr. Churchill was cradling as if it were made out of solid gold. I just want to enjoy this. But that scout was right, Hilton Smith said. I bet this team would have a good chance of winning a pennant if they just let us play. No doubt, Satch said. And if we had Josh Gibson, we'd win that pennant going away. It wouldn't even be fair. He paused and glanced around the locker room. I'll tell you one thing, and it ain't just talk. I've played on a lot of teams, but this just might be the best. Satch usually said that kind of stuff like a boast, but this time in his voice had a different tone, regret maybe, and Nick thought he knew why. It was possible that Satch was the best pitcher in the world, yet he never got a real chance to prove it. He should have been facing down the Yankees in the World Series in front of tens of thousands of people rather than dominating a semi-pro tournament in Kansas. Nick didn't understand why that was fair. Why couldn't Satch and Hilton and Double Duty play in the majors? Who wouldn't want to see the best play against the best? Did the color of a person's skin really matter that much? It was at moments like these Nick realized that some things in the adult world simply made no sense. But he was nevertheless grateful for Satch's example. Nick's little limp felt like an awfully minor problem when compared to a rule that prevented you from ever reaching the pinnacle of your profession. Over his few months with the team, Nick had learned many things. But he knew that the most important lesson, the one that would stick with him for the rest of his life, had come